ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930 present The Drive.
It is Tuesday, March 5th. Your drive begins now on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. I'm your host, Paul Swann. We're going to open up our text line this hour for you at 304-396-TALK. That's 304-396-8255. You can also find me on X, the app formerly known as Twitter, at Paul Swann. More basketball talk today. We'll hear from Dan D'Antoni as the Thundering Herd traveling to get ready for the tournament in Pensacola. The Marshall men and women in tournament action this week, with the women taking on the winner of Georgia State or App State. We'll keep an eye on that one tomorrow. That is the Wednesday game. The Marshall women have a double bye. So the tournament beginning today, and it will continue tomorrow. And then the Herd will play on Friday on the women's side. The game that we're interested in is the number 8 game. Number 8 seed Georgia State facing off against the number 9 seed App State. They will advance. One of those two teams will advance and take on the Thundering Herd on Friday, and that'll be a 12:15 airtime right here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. On the men's side, of course, you know the deal. Thundering Herd will play on Thursday. It's the final game of the bracket that evening. 7:30 airtime. It's going to be Marshall, the 10 seed, facing off against the number 7 seed Georgia State, the team that just beat Marshall a few days ago, with the winner advancing to the quarterfinals on Saturday. Marshall men would take on James Madison, the 2 seed, if the Herd would advance. And then if Marshall could advance another day, more than likely you get number 3 seed Troy. There's a possibility you could get one of the lower seeds, but my money is on the 3 seed Troy advancing to the semifinals. Championship games, anybody's guess, but I think App State is a solid selection. You could almost go chalk with this tournament and pick App State. You could possibly take You could possibly take James Madison. And, of course, Marshall could disrupt a lot of that coming in as the 10 seed. So we'll get into that a little bit later on here from Dan D'Antoni. We'll update you on what's happening with the Thundering Herd all week here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. So, baseball. Big day today for Thundering Herd baseball. Now, originally we had a game scheduled for tonight that's been moved to tomorrow, and it's going to be the Thundering Herd taking on the Bellarmine Knights. That is going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be a 6 o'clock game. So Marshall and Bellarmine going at it tomorrow. Herd coming off that series win against the Manhattan Jaspers. And Trey Hondras, hero of the game for that opener. But Bryce Blevins, what a standout performance he had in the second game in relief. He threw 7.1 scoreless innings with 9 strikeouts against Manhattan. And with that said, he's named the Sun Belt Conference Baseball Pitcher of the Week. Struck out a career-high 9 against the Jaspers, allowed only 4 hits and 3 walks. You know what? Marshall's got something there. He's the pitcher of the week in the Sun Belt. So congratulations to him. That's good. Good things are happening with the new ballpark. And we talked a little bit about it yesterday, and I'm curious what your thoughts are about the ballpark so far. If you haven't had a chance to really express what you thought just yet, we'll open up our text line for you this hour at 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Now, I'm going to be at the ballpark tomorrow. If the weather holds and we get a game in tomorrow, I'm going to be at the ballpark doing the show. and I hope to be speaking with Ryan Crisp. Usually we speak to Ryan or someone from his marketing staff, his team. Ryan Crisp is the Associate Athletics Director for Annual Giving, Ticket Sales, and Fan Engagement. So I hope if I'm talking to him tomorrow, we can talk a little bit about the ballpark, some of the things that maybe you want me to ask him. This is a great time to get those questions in now. You can also find me on Twitter. It used to be called Twitter, now X, at Paul Swann, and we'll ask some of those questions tomorrow. So if there's anything that you're curious about, if Marshall's going to do this thing, if there's going to be something else that's coming along, or if there's going to be some adjustments as Marshall starts to actually live in the ballpark and use it and go through day-to-day operations in the facility, what's going to change, what's going to stay the same, what can be done better, what was working, what didn't work. Any questions like that, anything you want to share with your experience, we'll ask those questions tomorrow of Mr. Crisp, and I'm hoping we get the game in. Now, if we don't get the game in tomorrow, weather not allowing it, we'll still hopefully have Ryan on tomorrow, so we can ask those questions of him. So if there's anything you got, let me know. And I'm curious to hear what you had to say. I think the biggest thing I've heard so far is the scoreboard. Bigger's better, right? Everybody wants bigger. I get it. I want bigger. I want a bigger scoreboard. I always want a bigger scoreboard. The one that they put in Jones C. Edwards Stadium? I want a bigger one. Not big enough for me. I want a bigger one. Give me more. Double the size of that thing. And it's pretty big right now, but give me bigger. Double that. That's what I'm looking for. So I don't know if I'm the right guy to say, hey, I want a bigger scoreboard, but I'm kind of curious what that scoreboard was like for you. And, nighttime game, if we get a nighttime game in tomorrow, I'm curious to see how that looks in the nighttime. I know the one at softball was perfect. I thought softball looked great. Softball under the lights as well, that was just nice. And it gives Marshall a lot more flexibility. And that's good because Marshall can do more with the softball program. Now that you have lights, you should always have lights. And I'm hoping this point forward, when it comes to facilities, you have everything you need. If you build a new facility, make sure you have everything you need. And, of course, it was great that Marshall got a softball facility, but it needed lights. Now it has lights. And baseball coming with everything you need right away. Open up the box. Here it is. Here's your brand new baseball stadium. And here's what you have. You have everything you need to be a Division I baseball team. Congratulations. Go have fun. That's where we're at right now with baseball. And I think we're having fun so far. So the Thundering Herd basketball team in action this week, both the men and women. Looking forward to that. Baseball, of course, softball, everything that's going on. So there's a lot going on with the Thundering Herd. We'll hear more from Dan D'Antoni. I'm curious what you have to say about Dan. This is totally anecdotal, but I know there's some frustration, at least with people who are talking to me, telling me things, asking me questions. Paul, think he'll retire? Is this the last season? What's Dan need to do to stay next year? Do you think it's going to be another year of Marshall basketball with Dan D'Antoni? A few questions like that. Where are you at right now with Dan? Be honest with me. Do you think that this should be the final season for Dan D'Antoni, or has he earned enough, done enough to warrant another season and give him the opportunity to try to put this thing back together? Because last year, Marshall almost won the regular season championship. This year, not exactly, the 10 seed. Up and down. Has Dan done enough with you, for you, that, okay, you can have this off year and come back better than ever next year? We'll talk about it with you. 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. We'll also hear from the man himself when we continue on today's edition of The Drive. This is ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
Welcome back to today's edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Our text line this hour is 304-396-TALK. That's 304-396-8255. West Virginia Girls State Basketball Tournament action today in Charleston and Class AAA, the score that we're most interested in. Wayne beat Kaiser today 75-38, so the Wayne Pioneers advance on in the tournament. We'll keep you updated on all of the local teams the rest of the week, as there will be a big matchup coming up tomorrow. I believe it is Spring Valley and Huntington for, the fourth time? If I've got my math correct there, they've played a lot. So hopefully it'll be a good matchup once again between those two. And I think I've got the number right. That they 4 times. I mean, it's hard enough to beat a team 3 times, let alone 4 times. So crazy stuff in basketball in the state of West Virginia. Let's go to our text line, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. From our text line, texter says, Paul, Coach Dan Toney has done a good job of bringing excitement back to Marshall basketball. However, it might be time for a change, but I do think he deserves another season to bounce back. Thank you for that text. He got the team to the NCAA tournament. That was several years ago, but that was something that Marshall hadn't done since Rick Huckabee. So that's something that Dan has done for Marshall that you can't take away. The team almost won the regular season trophy last season. Close isn't going to get it done, but Marshall was close. And so this season, Marshall's down. Dan has talked about a few players that he thought would be with the team that did not decide to stay. Andrew Taylor, for one. I know his name has come up a few times. And, of course, he's back in the transfer portal now. You think you want him back on the team? I'm going to say no to that automatically. You can disagree if you want, but I'm going to say no to that. But here we are. It's tournament time where the Herd has an opportunity to once again go on a run, win the tournament, get into the NCAA tournament. And that's the thing. You win the conference tournament, then you get into the NCAA tournament. What are you going to say then? He'll come back and say, look, I told you, we got it done. We were gearing up. The only thing that matters is winning the tournament, because that gets us in the NCAA tournament. Win the conference tournament. Then you go to the big dance. And, of course, if the Thundering Herd falters in the tournament, then I'm sure that's going to be ammunition for a lot of people. And this tournament format, it could be advantageous for the Thundering Herd. That was something I asked Dan yesterday when I was talking to him during his presser. What advantages does this tournament format have for you? He likes it. He's a big fan of this, especially with the style of play Marshall plays and the fact that Marshall focuses more on Marshall than the opponent. So it really doesn't matter who the opponent is. Marshall's going to focus on Marshall, according to Dan D'Antoni.
It is for me, us, because we practice for ourselves, not for other teams as much as others do. A lot of them prepare for other teams, and I've always been one. I'm kind of a Vince Lombardi guy. We're going student body left, student body right, try to stop it. And I'm one of those guys that you perfect what you do. And you do a little bit of scout, don't get me wrong. You do a little bit of prep for the other team. But your emphasis and your prep is playing good basketball. And if you play good basketball, you're going to have a real good shot at the end of the day to win games. This thing about I'm going to be the best chess player out of all the 367 coaches, and I'm going to win every matchup by being a better chess player, okay, you're probably in the dream world. What you better probably be is the best team on the floor, and that they're playing well. And if they're playing well and we're the best team on the floor, I'll take those odds any day.
I think that argument has some merit. It has some merit. Maybe not necessarily in every application on the basketball court, but I think that argument has some merit. Because if you're the better team out there, you can usually win if you're executing better, if you're making shots. There's some merit to that. But if it's a tight game, it's a close game, you're going to have to try to find a way to win. You're going to have to squeeze every advantage you possibly can. If it's tightly matched, if you've got two teams that are about equal, then you're going to have to find an edge somewhere. So, again, that has some merit with me. You want to focus on being the best team out there, and I try to do that in my personal life. And right now, it's day-to-day with me too. So in a sense, I get that. I respect what Dan says. It's day-to-day with me too. I'm trying to be the best person I can be professionally and personally. And I got to do some prep work. We all do. We really do. But at the same time, I think you got to be prepared and ready to go just in case you can't go out and out-athlete somebody. Or if the shots aren't falling, then you got to do something else. If the three-point shot's not falling, then okay, you're going to have to adjust something, right? I think basketball, there's a lot more strategy in the game. Sometimes. There should be anyway. But then you look at the NBA, and man, it's just, it's, okay, can you stop LeBron tonight? Yes? No? So there is some merit to what he had to say. I can't dismiss it, but at the same time, I do feel like there has to be some layers to this. There has to be some depth. Maybe not play chess, but play checkers. Play checkers with him, coach. Not necessarily chess. But again, I agree with what he's saying. You got to focus on being the very best team out there. And he's acknowledging, hey, there is some prep involved. There's some scouting here. We just don't show up and toss the ball and go. We have an idea of our opponent. But at the end of the day, I think you have to have a mixed balance here. You got to have your team prepared. And like a Kim Caldwell, we're going to do what we do, and you have to stop us. And how do you do what you do? Well, you're going to have to make sure you're doing it very well, and it works. So Dan likes the tournament format because there are a lot of teams that spend time prepping. Now they just got to go out and play. You don't get that much prep time. Maybe a little film study, keep an eye on your opponent, follow along. Marshall has the disadvantage. I think it's a disadvantage. The bracket's a disadvantage for Marshall. Marshall's got the last game. Now, if Marshall wins, then Marshall's got to face off against James Madison. And James Madison will have had more prep time than Marshall. Marshall and Georgia State have the same amount of prep time. And they just saw each other. So you should be ready to go. You should be well-versed on Georgia State. And that's something that Dan talked about yesterday when looking at the fact that, hey, look, you're playing the same team you just faced. Does that help you? And he talked about that yesterday. If I remember correctly, it's cut number 3 on my audio archive, and he did talk about that when we were talking about Georgia State. It's one game at a time for him. Let's revisit that just for this segment.
Again, I'm going to go right back to where I am. It's one game at a time. It doesn't matter. I go back to my brother in high school, and they beat Pineville 35 points one game, 42 the next, and got beat in the tournament by 2. Number 1 team in the state, and they just literally destroyed Pineville. Two games in a row. They go, it's on the home court of Pineville, and they lose by 2. So, you don't know. That's what makes it fun, too. As a fan, that's what makes it fun.
So does that make it fun? You just don't know? That makes it fun for you? Ultimately, what makes it fun for fans is the only thing that matters is winning. That's it. You've told me that enough. It's fun when the herd wins. And wins convincingly, especially in football. If we're talking about the herd won by a field goal in football, sometimes I get people who are just mad. Now they're going to run an air raid at Marshall, and if they win by 21 points or more, I think everyone will be happier. But that was Dan on the whole concept of having that. You've played a team again, doesn't matter. We go one game at a time. And he's also of a different mind on the concept of go time. For the players, it is go time. For a lot of people, they get into a different rhythm, a different focus, or they focus more when they know the next game's the last game. If I don't win this game, it's the last game. I don't want it to be the last game. So I want to go out there and win it. What do I need to do to win it? I got to focus more. I got to be more attentive. I got to be my very best. Sometimes people can overdo it and over-focus on the situation instead of just going and playing. The opponent should have your attention. You should be focused on that team. Don't have distractions. Abby Beeman, according to Coach Caldwell, got to eliminate distractions. So I know players know what it takes when it comes to this is single elimination. You lose, you're done. Same thing with the NCAA tournament. You lose, you're done. But this, you're trying to get to the NCAA tournament. You don't have any other safety net. You lose, you're done. And for a lot of these players, they're done. That's it. No more basketball for them. But Dan has a different philosophy. There's not necessarily a go time concept here when it comes to the way Dan approaches this.
Well, I've seen it here just even recently. They're trying. They want to win. I'm telling you, they want to perform, and they're intense. They was great practice. We had great practice before we went on the road trip. These were great practices. So we'll see. You know, I've challenged a few of them what they got to do. We'll see if they can come through. But you know, regardless of what happens, I'm with these guys. You know, I go down with them and I win with them. And that's the way we start the season. That's the way we end. And I'll always be that way for my team and my players, my coaches, and for the fans of Marshall, the ones that really get in here, live and die Marshall, and root as hard as they can in a positive way to get these kids to the end of their dreams and to really our fans' dreams. It's getting the NCAA and see what you can do.
That's Dan D'Antoni when he was asked about the concept of go time. So he said that they're focused. That's not necessarily, okay, we gotta lock in, it's live or die time. Yeah, we're focused. They're playing hard. They don't want to quit. They want to give it their best. I don't know if that's the intensity you're looking for. For me, it's go time. It's go time. That means something different to me. That's a different level. That's a different platform. There are levels to these things, and that's a different level for me. If it's go time, and I know it's go time, yeah, I'm going to give you my best. I'm going to lock in. I'm going to focus, and hopefully I'm going to come out on top, and I'm going to give you my best, though. And that's what we're asking for. Hopefully the team is going to be able to give us their best. And I think the disconnect here is maybe they were giving you their best throughout the season, but I know that a lot of fans were not happy with what that was. So we're hoping that they take it to the next level. As long as they play hard, I'm on board with it. As long as they give us their best performance, I'm on board with it. Yeah, there's nothing I can say personally about these kids. And of course, a new season comes, a new formation of kids, old and new. You start over again. But there is a hunger to win, and there is a desire to win. It's been a long time since Marshall has been a consistent championship program in basketball. We got to go back to the Southern Conference days when Marshall was almost a locked-in favorite to win the tournament, go to the NCAA tournament on a yearly basis, and that has dropped off, and there's still that hunger and desire, and this hasn't been a good season for the Thundering Herd. And I think it's a better basketball conference. I think it's at least run better. I don't know if it's top to bottom much better. I think it's better than current configuration of Conference USA, but it's not fly by night. It's not AAU basketball. That's what it isn't. It's not in a football. I think Dan said it best. This is one of my favorite comments of his yesterday. Talking about what the Sun Belt setup is and comparing it to different setups. One of my favorite quotes, and he pointed out some of the things that after I gave it a try, and I tried to give it a positive spin, I just couldn't. I did not like the setup of the the Conference USA setup. I like the Sun Belt setup, and so does Dan.
Well, we played AAU recreation type of games in Dallas, and that there were 2 games going on. You're in a football arena. It wasn't a good setup. So this obviously beats it. But then on top of that, Sunbelt does a great job of staging the games, putting it on. The arena was nice. You're getting down to a Sunshine State for most of us, and got a chance to be in Pensacola. It's a nice town. Go down and have fun. That's what it's about. We're going to go down, and we're going to have fun by playing. Fans should go down and have fun, just have fun. And, enjoy it, and then root as hard as you can and live with the results.
Can you live with the results? Can you just have fun? Or is it must win? You have to win. Or are you somewhere in between? Can you find your happy place at the same time, root for the team, and expect a positive outcome? Be disappointed from any standpoint if Marshall doesn't win the conference tournament. Can you be that fan? Again, there are levels to this thing. We'll get your text in, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. That's our text line. More coming up on this edition of The Drive, ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
Welcome back to today's edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Our text line this hour is 304-396-TALK. That's 304-396-8255. You can also find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Paul Swann. Let's go back to our text line. Texter says, Paul, we do, referring to Marshall, we do what we do regardless of the other team. We do what we do. And every coach in the league knows what we do and how to defend it. No adjustment, no change. We do what we do. Pretty simple for opposing teams. Thank you, Texter, for that comment. It's the philosophy of I'm going to do what I do, you come and stop it. And the problem sometimes is the other team is better at stopping it than you are at doing it. And so what do you do in that situation? It was Kim Caldwell's. Now, let's be fair. Similar question to Coach Caldwell over the course of the season. And she has said, at this point, you get what you see, and we will do what we do. You have to stop what we do. How much can you change? How much can you change? And I don't see that happening for this tournament. You cannot change what you do fundamentally that much. So Dan has to make sure that his team is doing what they do the very best, and it's better than what the other team does. And that's the problem, because sometimes Marshall isn't able to do that very well. And so Marshall has suffered this season, and unfortunately, guess what? It's led to a losing season in the conference and on the regular season as well. 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. From our text line, Texter wrote in yesterday. I didn't catch it, so I'm going back now. Let me get this one in. I didn't catch it. It was after the show. Texter was talking about some of the things that they saw at the baseball park, and love the ballpark, but there are a couple of things. And Texter says, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining because so many people have been waiting for a baseball park. So they said that we're happy. I'm happy to finally have a new stadium, and I'm not trying to complain. Just there are a couple of things that I thought were wrong. Was the gist of the text. I appreciate that. Thank you for texting in today. That's a good point. There are a couple of things that you're going to have to live with when it comes to the baseball park. It's going to get better. If there's something that's not working, it's going to get better. How comfortable are the seats? Were they spaced too close? Are they spaced just right? What do the sight lines look like? What's the best place to sit? Should you sit in the outfield? Should you sit third base side, first base side, what's the better side? What are the concessions like? Did they do okay with a first series? Will they do better the second time around? Again, we got a game tomorrow, so hopefully the Herd's working on ironing out anything that needed to be ironed out. It's a work in progress. There's more coming with this place. And I hope it's going to be a great home for Marshall baseball for years to come. And I hope we never have to worry about Marshall not having adequate facilities ever again. Yeah, at one point, and this was many, many years ago, I was of the mindset, if you're not going to do it right, why are you doing it? If you're not going to do it right, why are you putting in the effort to pretend like you have a baseball team? And now you don't have to pretend anymore. You have a baseball team with a baseball stadium that can and should be able to compete with a very good Sun Belt League. 304-396-TALK is the text line. Let's get you updated on the Sun Belt bracket on the women's side. 2 games are in the books, and for day 1, Georgia Southern, the 12 seed, beat the 13 seed Texas State 72-70. So Georgia Southern will face off against ULM. That's in the upper half of the bracket. Coastal Carolina, the 11 seed, beat the 14 seed South Alabama 79-60. So Coastal Carolina will face off against Southern Miss, and that is in the upper half of the lower bracket, and that's coming up on Wednesday. It will not impact Marshall until we get to the semifinals, any of these games. So Georgia Southern could be the team you face, or ULM or Old Dominion. Of course, Marshall would have to get past App State or Georgia State first. But we got a couple of games in the books, and now the Thundering Herd will wait until Wednesday matchups. And the App State-Georgia State game is the one that we're going to be keeping an eye on the most. And we'll know early because that's going to be a 12:30 tip tomorrow. Let's go back to the text line, 304-396-TALK, 304-396-8255. Texter says, I would like to see Marshall versus Iowa in the big dance. Go Lady Herd. Thank you for that text. I would like to see Marshall versus anybody in the big dance. But I'll take Iowa. Caitlin Clark, I'll take that. That game would have a lot of attention. Could you imagine the attention that game would have? If Marshall dialed up Iowa in the tournament, how much attention would be put on Marshall? Or did Marshall get overshadowed? That's the other concern. Either that game's going to generate a lot of attention, people are going to be watching it, or people are going to be focused in on Iowa a lot more. I'd like to see the Herd in the tournament. I'll take the opponent that's served up. I'm not picky right now, but I would like to see a lot of attention for Marshall. If Marshall can make some noise, getting into the tournament's one thing. If Marshall can make some noise in the tournament, that's the big thing for me. Win a game, win 2 games, win maybe 3 games. And then, maybe Marshall can do this. That's a big dream. But you got to get past the conference tournament first and then on your way. But that's what I want to see from this Thundering Herd team. And then year 2, I want to see Marshall continue this success. I'd like to see this program in this league get to the point where if you don't win the tournament, it's good enough where you can get an at-large. Or it's going to be really top-heavy, and it's going to be Marshall and a couple other teams, but mostly Marshall. Maybe a couple other teams that can be consistent, like a James Madison, maybe a Troy. Remember, Conference USA for a long time was Memphis and everybody else. Not so much in men's basketball. App State's good. James Madison's good. Troy's good. And there's a theme here. Have you noticed there's a theme here? James Madison's good, doing what it's needing to do to become a consistent all-around program. Troy seems to be doing what it needs to do to be a consistent all-around program. App State's good in a lot of things, women's basketball. I think the 9 seed is they're a dark horse. I think they're a better team than maybe the 9 seed indicates. I want to see Marshall in that conversation always. And I also want to see this league get to the point where you can guarantee at least a couple of bids, maybe be one of those better mid-major conferences where 2 or 3 is not unheard of as far as teams that are taken. Back to our text line. Texter says, Paul, if the Lady Herd were to lose in the Sun Belt Conference tournament, can they still make the big dance? I don't know if the net's high enough. That's going to be the big question. I think they would be among the teams that are first out. I just don't think the net's strong enough. I don't think the strength of schedule is going to allow for that. If Marshall gets the championship game and maybe bows out, maybe they would get some consideration. They definitely are going postseason. I just don't know which tournament they would ultimately be in just yet. They're going postseason. You can write that down. That it's sort of a half answer, but they're going postseason. It's going to be the big dance or it's going to be one of the secondary tournaments. That's a guarantee. So just plan on tournament games somewhere for Marshall women's basketball. But I don't know if the net is going to allow for that, especially if we get some crazy upsets as well. That's the thing you got to account for. If you're not in the higher portion of the net, it's not an automatic. I mean, maybe the resume is good enough. Maybe if you got a couple other games. Remember, they started out a little slow before they got used to what they were trying to do as a team, new strategy, new way of doing things. If they could have got maybe a couple more games early on, I don't know if those were games that realistically would have pushed you over. But I think the resume, it's going to be interesting. I hate waffling on that answer, but it's going to be interesting. I think they're good enough to get in. I don't know if the metrics say they're good enough to get in. Eyeball test, I would think they're good enough. I mean, they're a champion out of the Sun Belt. Maybe you get one in. Maybe you get an at-large. If Marshall doesn't win the tournament, maybe they can squeeze in and be an at-large. It's going to be tough right now. Hopefully Marshall's just dominant. Marshall's just got to win 3 games. Marshall's been on the road before, been at neutral locations, right? Marshall can win. I mean, this is even more advantageous for Marshall because it's truly a neutral location. So I think there's a shot Marshall could. Outside chance getting in. Outside chance. Very outside chance on strength of schedule. Eyeball test, I'm a little biased, but I think Marshall deserves the opportunity. I just don't think the Sun Belt's a 2-bid league right now. Final thoughts coming up on this edition of The Drive, ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
Final segment coming up here on The Drive, ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. It's going to be a quick one. We're about out of time. Double check the Marshall women's basketball team net ranking, 77th right now. I think that's outside looking in as far as the tournament's concerned because not everyone's going to get in. There's going to be automatic qualifiers. Obviously, some of those teams are going to be upset teams that have worked their way into the spot with big wins in the tournament. So that's going to knock some higher-rated teams down. And I think 77 gets you on the outside. If Marshall can get that up a little bit more, maybe there's an outside shot looking in. Strength of schedule of the league, that's going to play a factor. Is the Sun Belt more than a 1-bid league right now? Whatever happens, I think with the way the teams played, the way the teams performed, Marshall will have postseason. It's just any postseason will be good. If it's not the NCAA tournament, is it going to be disappointing? Yes. Is it going to be the end of the world? No. Go out and win that tournament. For the men, there's no opportunity. Marshall's got to win the tournament or they're not going to play in postseason. There's not an opportunity. There's just nothing there. And I wouldn't want to see this team play in one of those pay-to-play tournaments anyway. Been there, done that. It was fun. Don't want to go back. The great little experience there for a guy like John Elmore, finish out his career on top. It was fun for the Herd fans to watch John, but I don't think that this is going to be something that I would like to see replicated anytime soon. NIT is the consolation prize that I would take for men's basketball. Nothing lower. For the women, more opportunities I will take because there are not that many opportunities compared to men's athletics. Women need all the opportunities that are presented to them. Take them. Let's build off of that. I'd still be disappointed if it wasn't an NCAA bid. But I would take one of the other tournaments. But for the men, just going back to that, that's not where I am. If it's not the NIT, pass. Do not accept. Do not even pursue it. Thanks for everyone who texted in today. We'll be back with you tomorrow. We'll do it better here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Tomorrow, weather permitting, there's going to be a baseball game at the new baseball stadium, Jack Cook Field. I should be there, and we'll hopefully hear from a few people. Most importantly, Ryan Crisp, the Associate Athletics Director, Annual Giving, Ticket Sales, and Fan Engagement. If you've got questions, anything that you would like me to ask him about the new ballpark or anything else, tomorrow is a great opportunity. Get those in. You can find me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at Paul Swann. Of course, you can find me right here on our text line. We'll get all those questions in tonight and tomorrow and have a lot to ask Ryan when we're at the ballpark, hopefully with the weather permitting. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back with you tomorrow here on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. Until then, have a great night, everyone.
Retransmitting on Glorious FM on 94.1 W227BS Huntington. This is 930 WRVC Huntington, celebrating 100 years of broadcasting.